Welcome to the Eco. I am Jacob Wolf, and you are here on the ESPN Esports YouTube channel. You may be used to seeing us on Twitch live. We did that for quite a while, and we have done a little bit of a pivot here. Given that Counter-Strike Global Offensive has a lot of news in some periods of time and no news in others, we wanted to be a little bit better about the schedule and start doing a lot more video-on-demand content, as you see here. Today is Thursday, July the 16th. ESL announced that ESL One Cologne will be played totally online. Obviously, if you've been paying attention to the news, this seemed as if it would be a foregone conclusion. COVID-19 is still ravaging a lot of the world, particularly in the Western Hemisphere. And additionally, there was an announcement a little bit over a month ago that the German Chancellor would not allow for live sports events through the end of August, if I remember correctly. But we wanted to talk to someone who was integral in this decision. We welcome on a veteran of ESL here, Mr. Michael Volkars, known as Carmac to many. Michael, how are you?
Well, as we discussed a little bit in the production pre-chat, my brain is all chop suey because I've had little kids run around and play just in an enclosed space around me. So hopefully I'll be able to make coherent sentences, but otherwise I'm completely fine.
So, as I mentioned, Angela Merkel made that announcement a little bit more than a month ago that they would be barring sports events of a certain number of audience from happening in Germany through the end of August. So, why is this decision to make ESL One Cologne totally online happening now rather than sooner after that announcement?
Well, that's because we were discussing running it on LAN, so without an audience, but on LAN, similar to Katowice, where the players are present, they're playing, competing in the best possible environment for it. And it's, we've already rescheduled ESL One Cologne once because this is one of the events that we treat, I have to say, differently to others, simply because of the magic that the audience and the players and the history of it has managed to basically accumulate into this event. So we didn't expect to be able to run an event with 15,000 people in the arena. I think it's much too early for this, regardless of the chancellor saying one thing or another. It's just not safe. Major sports leagues are still struggling with letting audience in, and we've been actually monitoring that, looking for advice on how they do it, so we would be able to do some of the things they are doing. But with us, it's a little bit more difficult than running a sports league in a single country, right? You can quarantine players, no problem, but the moment the travel component comes in, you've got US players, you've got Brazilian players, you've got multiple different nationalities, people coming from countries that have a completely different rule set when it comes to COVID. We had a gigantic spreadsheet monitoring all that, population, number of cases per capita, quarantine rules, can you leave, can you come out, when you come back, is there a quarantine period, and local state law in Germany, and TLDR to the decision. Unfortunately, this, in spite of all the efforts of everyone, and it's very personal to the people that work in Cologne and at the ESL office, we had to make a judgment that it's too early to play the event in a physical environment.
What was I guess, kind of the final nail in that decision? Was it when the European Union said they wouldn't let Americans into any of their participant countries? What sort of was the moment that you guys had to make this decision and unfortunately face the music?
I think, well, the fact that it's now become so difficult for US citizens to travel, particularly into Europe, into the European Union, it definitely had a lot to do with it, because ESL One Cologne is a global event in nature. It's a global competition in nature. This is obviously this is ESL One Cologne online that we are now talking about. No one really thinks anymore that this is the same thing. Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit like the bad news that you're expecting, but you wish it not to happen, not to come true. And until the last minute, we had an internal deadline on when to essentially face the music, and we had to face the music. But until the very last moment, we were kicking and screaming internally, trying to make sure that a critical mass of great players would be able to show up. But it wasn't meant to be. We'll keep trying for future events. It will get easier as hopefully we get closer to vaccines, as hopefully some countries have COVID in check. But it's not meant to be for Cologne. As I said, we tried to give ourselves more time by pushing it to August. The event is in 4 weeks, and at this stage, it's just not safe to travel. And it's too difficult also to get travel approved for multiple countries because it's frivolous travel. Let me put it this way, or something that the people on the border might consider frivolous travel, just for the kick of it, is still not allowed.
So that's why it was not, you weren't trying to aim at something kind of like what it's been reported that Riot Games wants to do with the World Championship and do this bubble environment, right? Is that why that was a limited option, just because of potential travel restrictions?
Yes and no. I mean, technically, if we had a whole event that is supposed to last, nearly a month or something like that, and there's literally nothing else on the competitive calendar, then we could consider it. But obviously, teams have multiple things to take into consideration on their end, so it's not such a simple thing at the end of the day. Yeah, Counter-Strike is much more open. Teams have multiple options on what to do. If ESL One Cologne was a tournament that is the only tournament that is out there and nothing else exists, that's probably something that we could entertain, but that's just not realistic in this landscape.
I want to ask about the repetition that we've gotten in Counter-Strike because of COVID-19. We've seen a bunch of events, CS Summit. We saw the Rio qualifier as well, or the RMR event that happened in May online, and Blast and DreamHack, right? We've had several events just by nature of geography where it's basically the same teams, more or less, in the round robin. They may be organized into different groups or they may have different opponents, but we're getting a lot of the same flavor, right? Particularly in North America and Europe. That's going to happen here too now with Cologne. So, I mean, what from a tournament organization perspective and also a broadcast perspective, what do you all think you can do to kind of make this more entertaining, other than us getting to see, or the audience getting to see more or less the same thing they've been saying for 4 months, 5 months now?
Well, first of all, we have not yet concluded on what we would do with the talent, because the talent is, some of the top commentators in Counter-Strike are currently in the US, including the ones that we regularly work with. So we still need to determine if and to what degree that is an online show as regards the commentators, because it's easier to bring 1 or 2 people into Germany as opposed to 20 people, for example, from the US. So that's one thing, but we do have a key advantage here in that we can still give it a Cologne flavor because our offices and studios are in Cologne, so we can generate a lot of content in Cologne. This is not the same as trying to pretend that it's going to be the same thing, and that it's going to be the flavor. I read a lot of comments that this tournament shouldn't be called the ESL One Cologne then, but it's not the name that made the event such a unique experience. it's the combination of all these things. So changing just the name doesn't really, it's pure sentimental value, I think. ESL One Cologne online, it's just a replacement, just to denote that. But we are able to, the interesting thing with COVID-19, and it's something we probably, as an industry, should have explored a long time ago, is that there's excellent ways to still deliver entertainment with an online product. For example, our B streams, we've significantly increased the quality of our B streams, which before COVID-19 we didn't really pay attention to that. So, and you see with the first post-COVID tournaments, they were kind of rough, and as time went along, they became better and better, and players were equipped with webcams, and we had live reactions from players. So these are the things that we're able to expect now. We plan to include the audience and have some of their reactions in the broadcast, and we want to localize the broadcast as well. We want to use the fact that we are in Cologne and go to Lanxess Arena and talk to people from that spot, because it is sentimental. Actually, we talked on the Friday when ESL One Cologne was originally supposed to open, and a lot of people were kind of, very pensive, lots of melancholy based on the fact that it was that day, and really, 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 a lot of people at ESL they put up with the hardships of the job just for that 5 minutes in the arena, to be one with everyone, to feel that, and just having a tiny contribution to that. It's such an amazing payoff. It's absolutely insane. But we're going to have to wait for the reboot, hopefully as soon as possible, so that we can have audience again. But again, not this time. Sorry for ranting so much.
Okay, that's okay.
It's a difficult subject for us.
And on this, it's been a tough year for CS competition. And there's one thing on the calendar that I think a lot of people are interested in, and that's November, and it's the Rio Major. And I talked to a lot of executives, players, teams, etc. And there are a lot of people that think they're playing for nothing right now. Every time that there's an RMR event, that they may end up, there may not be a major at the end. Obviously, Brazil is still, I believe, day over day, the highest per capita country for COVID-19, right there with the United States in terms of how many people live in Brazil versus how many people have been infected. Looking down the road, if you had to put a percentage chance on that happening, what is your percentage chance on ESL One Rio actually happening?
Well, that's a headline maker, that question right there. So I'll respond like this. We are doing everything we can to have a live event, and obviously monitoring the situation very closely. If you read the news, you know that currently things are not looking very good. But if it doesn't happen in Brazil, but it could happen elsewhere, we will talk to Valve and we'll try it. It's as simple as that. We have to, soccer leagues have rebooted and they're running. There's international soccer competitions that will happen in August, the UEFA Champions League. We are working towards having players physically on site in the same space and play. It just takes time, because it's such a complicated thing. And at the end of the day, to paraphrase Jurgen Klopp, a manager of a football team that I support, he said, football is the most important of the least important things. And to us, esports is the most important of the least important things. There's a number of other things that we need to respect that have priority over esports, and it's a terribly complicated manner overall. But eventually, we want to have players on LAN together competing, maybe even before the major. And if it's possible to run the major as a physical event somewhere with players, we will do that. We'll do everything we can to do that.
Well, Michael, we thank you so much for taking the time. For more Counter-Strike content, find us here on YouTube, youtube.com/ESPN Esports. You can also check out our website, espn.com/esports, for all the latest news updates about Counter-Strike Global Offensive.